go. Quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, I have a quadratic formula song that I'm going to teach you today, and we are going to sing it together. You may have heard other students over the years sing it.
On the recording.
Yes, it's going to be on the recording. I'm going to embarrass myself completely. That's okay, but here's how it goes. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, I would like you guys to sing it with me. 1, 2, 3. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, one more time to make sure it's stuck in your head for the rest of the day. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The funny thing is, every time I solve one of these quadratic formula problems, that song is going through my head. So let's write down some steps, though. To solve a quadratic equation using quadratic formula, here's what you're going to do. Step 1, write the equation in standard form. Now, do you understand why I had you do that in the warm-up? Okay, my warm-ups are not silly. They're to help us with what we need. Now, here's a suggestion. If we're writing something down and you don't remember what the words mean, or you think when you look at it later it's not going to ring a bell for you, what I would suggest, if you don't remember that standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, put it in a parenthesis underneath that. You need to, even though I didn't write it, you need to write what you need. Okay? Step 2. Identify the A, the B, and the C. Then you plug those 3 into the quadratic formula. And then simplify the radical if needed. As you do your homework, go through this checklist. If you go through it 15 times, you have the checklist in your head, which is the point. So let's look at example 1. It says solve x squared plus 3x equals 2. Step 1, write the equation in standard form. So I'm going to subtract the 2 from both sides of the equation. Step 2, identify A, B, and C. Well, there's no number in front of the x squared. It's assumed to be a 1. Sometimes I'll have a student say, well, isn't it 0? There's no number. What would happen if it were 0x squared?
There wouldn't be an x squared.
There wouldn't be. You're absolutely right. If it were 0, 0 times x squared would be 0, and you wouldn't have the x squared. So that's why it isn't 0. All right, step 3, plug it into the quadratic formula. All right, here we go. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I strongly recommend write the formula out every time in your notes, in the homework. What that's going to do for you is it's going to help you memorize it, okay? So this is negative 3 plus or minus square root 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. Now, we are Algebra 2 students. You write as much work as you need. You don't do what your neighbor needs, you do what you need. So what I mean by that is under that radical, if you can handle that that's 9 and then a minus become a plus. That's 9 plus 8 is 17. So that's negative 3 plus or minus square root 17 over 2. Okay? Any questions on number 1? All right, let's try 2. This should be review, right? You guys, is it coming back to you? All right, step 1, write the equation in standard form. So I'm going to subtract the 12x and add the 9. Step 1, write the equation in standard form. Step 2, identify A, B, and C. Now, I don't want you to grab your calculators, okay? We're not going to use our calculator on this one. Even though they're going to look rather large, I want to show you how you can end up doing a lot of problems still without the calculator, without panicking with large numbers. So this is going to be negative 30 plus or minus the square root. Negative 30 squared minus 4 times 25 times 9 all over 2 times 25. And you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, how could she expect us to do that without our calculators? And let me show you. Well, negative 30 is positive 30. And then watch this. Negative 30 times negative 30. I know a negative times a negative is positive. Now 30 squared. 3 times 3 is 9, but when you have a 0, you know, like in the tens place, that just adds 2 zeros. So that's 900. Now this stays a minus, but can somebody, besides me telling, how can you multiply 4 times 25 times 9 in an easy way? Elena?
If you do 4 times 25 first, that's 100. 100 times 9 is 900.
Exactly. She said 4 times 25 is 100, then 100 times 9 is just 900. Do you see, I didn't need to go grab that calculator. And 2 times 25 is 50. So I want to encourage you to, our calculator is a tool, but it's only for like decimals and huge numbers that we can't handle. Now what happens under that radical? It's 0, so that just drops out. So I get 30 over 50. They both end in a 0, so that means 10 goes into it. Okay, now let's pause here a moment, and I want you to just think and make a connection to earlier in our chapter. In the first example, we have 2 answers, right? The plus or minus gives us 2 answers. But in example 2, I'm only getting 1 answer. Does anybody remember, back to our graphing, what is the connection to a solution and the graph? Anybody remember? When we were graphing them, what was a solution on the graph? Not necessarily. The x-intercepts are solutions, right? Do you remember that? We talked about the x-intercepts are the solutions. So in example 1, this one is a parabola that's opening up, and so there are 2 solutions, 2 x-intercepts. When I graph this one then, if there's only 1 solution, what could the graph look like that would give us only 1 solution though? 1 x-intercept. No, it's a parabola, so it can't be a line. No, because x squareds open up or down, so it can't go sideways. That's a y squared, which we'll see later in the year. Exactly. Okay. So, and this was at 3/5. So let's say that's 3/5. If you get 1 solution, this means that the graph is touching the x-axis in only 1 spot to give 1 answer. Okay. Now, I want you to sort of look again at example 1. My radical, what was underneath it, is 17. What's under here in example 2 was 0. What do you think we're going to see on the third one? Under the radical.
Something that comes out.
Negative, right? A negative. So, step 1 says put it in standard form. And I need you to write a note here on this one. Note, if A is negative, then move the terms to the other side to make A positive because we do not want to deal with dividing by a negative, and we can avoid it, okay? So write this note down and make sure that, so when you're doing tonight's homework, which is 4.8 on your blue assignment sheet, if A is negative, you just bring everything to the other side. So this becomes 0 equals x squared minus 4x plus 5, like this, okay? So step 2, A is 1, B is negative 4, and C is 5. I really am singing the song in my head. I don't know if it's happening to you yet. Students will tell me after we sing it, the song's stuck in my head all day. So at the lock-in, you guys can sing it. You could make me proud tonight. All right, so here we go. X equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root, negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5 all over 2 times 1. Now that's 16 minus 20. 16 minus 20 is negative 4. Now remember, imaginary, you need to break it apart. So it's 2 plus or minus I. Remember, imaginary numbers, you have to break them apart into the real part plus the imaginary part. And so graphically, this means the parabola was either opening down the whole time and never crossed, or it was opening up and never crossed, okay? Okay, so then that leads us to the next topic, which is the discriminant. And I think you need to fill this in. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. The discriminant is what is underneath the radical. Does anybody remember from when we used our vocabulary, what is it called, what's underneath the radical?
Radicand.
The radicand. Good job, okay? The radicand is what's underneath the radical. And in the quadratic formula, that's the discriminant. Okay, we have a special name for it. So if the discriminant is positive, we get two real number solutions. And this one is like example 1, where you have a graph and it's crossing the x-axis in 2 places. If the discriminant is negative, like in example 3, you get 2 imaginary number solutions. And graphically, this means that the parabola is either above the x-axis the entire time or below, opening down the entire time. Now, if the discriminant is 0, there's only one real number solution. And this is the case where the parabola is touching the x-axis at its vertex. Okay? All right, any questions on the discriminant? So when the discriminant is positive, it crosses the x-axis twice. When the discriminant is negative, it has 2 imaginary solutions and it never crosses the x-axis. And if the discriminant is 0, the vertex is on the x-axis and there's one solution. All right, so in example 4, it says find the discriminant of the quadratic equation and give the number and type of solutions of the equation. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. b is negative 8, a is 1, and c is 17. So this is 64 minus 68. So the discriminant is -4. So based on our chart, how many solutions are there and what type are they? We have 2 imaginary solutions. All right, try letter B and C on your own. I'll give you a head start on me. Mm-hmm. All right, for B, did you get 0? A discriminant of 0, so there's one real number solution. C, I got 64 minus 60, which is 4. So I got 2 real number solutions. Okay, so the discriminant's very helpful. You could actually look at it first to tell what's going to happen before you even attempt to solve it, okay? All right, last example is an application. Quadratic equations have a lot of good applications for them. It says a juggler tosses a ball into the air. The ball leaves the juggler's hand 4 feet above the ground and has an initial vertical velocity of 40 feet per second. The juggler catches the ball when it falls back to a height of 3 feet. How long is the ball in the air? So the model, h equals -16t squared plus v sub 0t plus h sub 0 is the model for an object thrown into the air. T is the time, h sub 0 is the initial height, and v sub 0 is the initial velocity. Use this model to write a quadratic equation to model this situation, then solve. All right, does somebody want to attempt to plug the information in to the equation? They give us an initial vertical velocity. They tell us v sub 0 is that. H sub 0 is the height you start with, and h is your ending height, and t is time. Jaslyn, you want to try it?
Well, wouldn't the first h be 3?
Yes.
And then equals -16 t squared plus 40 t plus 4.
Awesome. Okay, awesome job. V sub 0 is 40. You started, so h sub 0 is the starting height, that's the 4, and the h on the left side is your ending height. Now, do you remember what I told you? When a is negative, bring it over to the other side. So this will give me 16t squared minus 40t minus 1 equals 0. Now, we're going to use quadratic formula. But instead of it being x equals, because it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, this is now a t. So this is going to be t equals -40 plus or minus the square root -40 squared minus 4 times 16 times -1 all over 2 times the 16. And I want you to take out your graphing calculators. And I want to show you how we can do this on the calculator. okay? On Monday, we'll write the program, but for now, we're not going to use that. Okay, so you have a negative 40, which is 40, and we're going to do the plus first, okay? Watch this carefully. Plus square root. If your calculator starts a parenthesis, and I'm going to do that so you guys can see it, because a lot of yours will do that, then it's a negative 40 being squared. I need another set of parentheses. I'm not making a mistake here. This first parenthesis saying this is what's underneath my radical. Then I have b squared minus 4 times the a is 16, and the c is a negative 1. Notice at the end, I need 2 right-hand parentheses. Does everybody see that that's 40 plus that square root? Press enter. Divided by, now if I have 2 times 16, I have to do a parenthesis and make it parenthesis 2 times 16. So one of my answers is 2.52 or 2.5, okay? Now, here's what I wanted to show you besides how you can get that in your calculator. The second answer is just 40 minus this. You don't have to re-enter this. Watch what our calculator will do. Second enter, pulls up 2 lines above. You can hit second enter as long as you would like. Now, watch this. I'm just going to use my left arrow and get to that plus sign that I want to change to a minus. Right there. I'm going to change that to a minus, press enter, divided by parenthesis 2 times 16. Can you have a negative time? No. So, time is 2.5 seconds. So sometimes, like a problem like this, lends itself to the calculator, would lend itself to using a quadratic formula program. But in general, we're not going to use the program